everyone, PushingUpRoses here, and today we're talking about dummies, and not the kind you find randomly on your Facebook feed, the kind you shove your hand into and desperately try to make entertaining.
The doy dot the dasket doll. The doy dot the dasket doll.
The act of ventriloquism, which means to speak from the stomach, has been around for a long time and didn't start out as a charming stage act featuring a creepy doll, and I use the word charming very loosely here. It was originally tied to religious practice, considered to be a power even. The ventriloquist would produce noises with his stomach, and those guttural sounds were thought to be the voices of the undead. The ventriloquist would act as the conduit between the spiritual world and the real world. By the 18th century, it evolved into a form of entertainment. It began without the use of a puppet and was more focused on how the performer could throw their voice. By the 1830s, more performers incorporated a small doll into their act, but it was Fred Russell who started his career in 1882 who brought this utter horror show into our lives. Since then, we've seen many great and not so great ventriloquists. If you're a millennial like myself, Sherry Lewis probably comes to mind as one of the better ones, but when I think of this classic dummy aesthetic, I think about Edgar Bergen and his puppets Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snurd, very lighthearted, very goofy performances. Because we can't have nice things, society has decided to take these already mildly disturbing looking dolls and make them horrifying demon spawn. Yeah, it just seemed like the next step. Actually, in all seriousness, it really does make sense. We've come full circle with the scary ventriloquism trope. It started out as a more supernatural, spiritual practice, and those origins seem to be used a lot in horror doll stories in the present day. Now that you have a very brief history of ventriloquism, let's get to the subject at hand. Did Goosebumps rip off the Twilight Zone? Yeah, it's clickbait, mama needs her paycheck, but I do want to compare and contrast an episode of The Twilight Zone to an episode of Goosebumps because I thought the similarities were significant. R.L. Stine's work has always struck me more of a Stephen King for kids type, particularly because he experiments with light body horror and monster characters, but his story, Night of the Living Dummy, is more comparable to this Twilight Zone episode simply titled The Dummy. I didn't find a lot of speculation, but there are some people that suggest Stine's character Slappy is inspired by this dummy named Willy. In general, I just think the killer toy trope, specifically possessed dummies, is a really interesting one that taps into a lot of people's childhood fears. Who hasn't looked over at their favorite doll or plushie while they're trying to sleep and think, wow, this is how I die? Let's take a look at the Twilight Zone first. The episode starts by introducing us to Jerry and his puppet Willy. It's clear that Jerry isn't voicing this puppet. Willy seems like a rather salty type and says he could be a better ventriloquist than Jerry, and this is followed by a rather disconcerting scene that shows Willy taking control of Jerry, voicing him instead. I've seen some ugly looking puppets, but I gotta say, Willy is up there. Those eyebrows are begging for death. We pan over to our boy Rod Serling, who introduces the story by means of spewing out more adjectives than a Schoolhouse Rock episode.
You're watching a ventriloquist named Jerry Etherson, a voice thrower par excellence. His alter ego sitting atop his lap is a brass stick of kindling with the sobriquet Willy. In a moment, Mr. Etherson and his knotty pine partner will be booked into one of the out-of-the-way bistros.
Well, I'm aroused. Backstage, Willy bites Jerry. The dancers seem unbothered. Wow, what was his problem? Oh, whatever, dance. 1, 2, 3, 4. In his dressing room, Jerry experiences the many mugs of Willy. This one says, "Don't look at me, I'm hideous." Well, this one says, "Ayy." It is also established that Jerry has a drinking problem. His agent tries to convince him to stop, but Jerry insists that he needs the alcohol so he can deal with Willy. Ayy.
Jerry, how many psychiatrists do you have to see? How many $20 an hour visits?
$20 an hour for a psychiatrist? I wish. Jerry says he was diagnosed incorrectly, saying he does not suffer from schizophrenia or a need to use the dummy as a way to express his emotions. I can't help but wonder if this is a reference to the 1929 film The Great Gabbo, a movie that does focus on a ventriloquist that uses a dummy named Otto to express his emotions. Jerry insists that Willy is alive.
Does this thing look alive to you? Well, does he?
Oh God, help me. His agent is at the end of his rope, berating Jerry for his drinking, his missed shows, and his overall bad attitude.
And the only thing you like better than scotch is sympathy.
Girl, same. Jerry is given 24 hours to come up with a solution to all of his problems. He decides to write up a different act with a new dummy named Goofy and dispose of Willy, who is like, you just go ahead and try. There's a short scene right here that really got my attention. A couple of dancers ask Jerry to make Willy talk, and he says no, but Willy shouts something at them from the dressing room. The women are impressed, then spy in on Willy with these, knowing looks. It seems suspicious. Do they know something? Are they in control of Willy? I just thought this stood out. After about a month of practice, Jerry is back out there with his new, somewhat lackluster dummy. I must admit, the performance was a bit wooden.
Ring-a-ding-a-ding-ding.
was normal. His agent decides to resign from the club. He makes one last effort to convince Jerry to get help, but he refuses and says he's going to burn Willie, then move to Miami with Goofy. As he's leaving, Jerry believes he hears Willie talking to him, even though one of the stagehands doesn't hear it. As Jerry is walking home, he is tormented by Willie, hearing his voice and seeing visions of him up on the walls. Up until this point, I thought this episode was really cheesy and I wasn't connecting with it in any profound way, but then there is this legitimately harrowing scene where Jerry runs into somebody named Noreen. He starts acting out of sorts, grabbing at her and pleading with her to get a drink with him, saying he's not sick, but he keeps hearing Willie's voice in his head. She becomes frightened and runs away. What's interesting to me about this scene is how vague it is. I'm not even sure if she's real or a figment of his past traumas, perhaps a memory Willie conjured up to cause anguish. Or it could be a hint that Jerry really is sick and he is experiencing some kind of psychosis. Either way, this scene shows Jerry's desperation and hurt, and that the story is deeper than just a possessed dummy. Jerry runs back into his dressing room where Willie is locked in the trunk. The voices become maniacal as Jerry unlocks it, grabs the dummy, and breaks it. When he looks down, however, he sees Goofy's glasses and realizes he destroyed the wrong one. There is something really heartbreaking about seeing Goofy's face broken into a million pieces on the floor. Willie says he has a new plan for Jerry, and in the final scene, Jerry has transformed into the dummy while Willie is now the ventriloquist. This is fine. Really interesting episode. I think there's a lot to unpack for having such a superficial plot synopsis. Now let's see how this compares to Goosebumps. So I will be comparing this to Night of the Living Dummy 2 because for whatever reason, the first book was never adapted into a television episode. However, I do find the stories slightly interchangeable, so I think this will still make for a totally fine comparison. As we begin, we see a very average family having their own very average talent show in their living room, as you do. Definitely getting extremely normal vibes from this.
Sarah, that's just beautiful.
It belongs in a museum.
Okay, Indy, calm down. Amy, the middle child in the family, shows off her passion for ventriloquism. However, her dummy, Dennis, has seen better days and loses his head during the show. She whinges a little and her parents tell her to look behind the couch for a surprise. She finds a brand new dummy named Slappy. He comes with a card with some nonsense words on it, which Amy promptly reads out loud, meaning he's alive now. Yes, it's that easy. Wow, Slappy has a chiseled face. Do you get it? Cause he's made of wood. As she's practicing later that night, Slappy says a few things on his own. Amy brushes it off and plops him next to poor beleaguered Dennis. He falls off the bench randomly, causing Amy to pick him up.
Oh, Dennis.
I just love how annoyed Amy is with Dennis, like he's always pulling this kind of shit. The next morning, Sarah, Amy's sister, discovers that somebody ruined her painting. And by ruined, I think it's been improved. I know she's young, but it was a little trite. The family blames Amy, and she expresses a lot of frustration at always taking the blame for everyone else's problems. At the next talent show, Dad puts on a rousing musical act. After he's finished, Amy takes the stage and Slappy shares his critiques of the family.
If you're such a booger brain, you tried to grow an eggplant by burying a chicken.
Slappy? More like crappy, am I right?
And how about that mother of yours? She went to a store and asked the clerk if he had anything her size, and he told her to try the freight elevator.
Jesus, Slappy, the library is closed. Amy is punished for being rude and sent to bed early. I want to move this along, so I'll just briefly summarize what happens. Slappy continues to try and essentially ruin Amy's life by speaking as her to her friends and family. He terrifies one of her school friends while they're doing their homework, he breaks her dad's guitar, and Amy's parents try to talk her into getting help as they believe she's using the dummy to vent her frustrations. Amy tries to dispose of Slappy, but he comes back and tells her she cannot escape. She will now be his slave. He says no one will believe her claims of him being alive and her family would lock her up, then goes on to say he can hurt her family in 100 different ways, and holy crap, this is for kids?
I can hurt you and your family in 100 ways.
Amy's sister now sees that Slappy is real and they do their best to destroy him. Not sure what a mop is gonna do, but okay. I'm gonna get him so clean. After a struggle, Slappy is knocked down and his face cracks open, releasing the evil within. It's revealed that Dennis was jealous of Slappy and is the one who tackled him moments before.
Oh, Dennis.
Alright, let's discuss these two stories. I want to start by saying that no, I don't think R.L. Stine necessarily grabbed his book idea from the Twilight Zone, but I do think the similarities are enough to say that it was at least inspired. Slappy versus Willie, the similar cadence of the dummies' voices.
All right, let go of the suit. I'm getting out of here.
That was your dad? Well, what a relief. I thought the cat got stuck in the dishwasher.
The whole "this thing is alive and it's making me a slave" vibe, it's clear they share a lot of elements, but I also clocked the fact that a lot of Dummies stories just always seem to go down the same way. What else are you gonna do with a dummy in terms of horror? Of course it's gonna come to life, be evil, and more obviously, it's gonna make you the dummy. Let's go back to the 1929 movie I mentioned before called The Great Gabbo, a pre-code musical drama about a volatile man who has trouble communicating with the people in his life, so he uses his dummy Otto as a conduit of sorts. I thought this was a really interesting, more psychological way to use the dummy, with the ventriloquist being the frightening part of the equation, though I will say I wasn't sure if Otto was supposed to be truly alive or not, because the tricks Gabbo did would be somewhat impossible in real life, but I believe the implication is that Gabbo is speaking for Otto and Otto represents his inner feelings. I think this film was a big proponent for the use of dummies in horror because even though the roles are flipped here, Gabbo is still somewhat possessed by Otto. He's under his control, relying heavily on him for emotional support and advice. That idea certainly leaks into the Twilight Zone and Goosebumps. The dolls in these episodes are obviously more alive, but they all share the threat of entrapment or being controlled in some way, whether it's physically or mentally. Even though I don't think Night of the Living Dummy is necessarily a blatant ripoff of the dummy, it seems cruel to call it that, I was pretty intrigued by the heavier themes they shared, particularly the aspect of not being believed by their peers or family, down to being told they need some form of psychiatric help. Yes, you could look at these two stories as a killer toy trope, but I found the most unsettling parts to be about the deteriorating mental state of the two main characters. Jerry's story is especially upsetting to me as his mental state has taken such a severe turn he turns to alcohol to quell it, but I think for Goosebumps' younger audience, Amy's constant conflict with her family and friends is also upsetting. The Twilight Zone, being more mature, does often portray the everyday frustrations of being an adult and having strained relationships with other people, and Goosebumps often expresses the everyday frustrations of being a kid and trying to navigate your way through life, and that can be way more frightening than an evil dummy with busted eyebrows. Sometimes even the main stories align. There's a part where Jerry frightens one of his friends, there's a part where Amy frightens one of hers. There are two dummies present, one goofier than the other, and even though the endings are very, very different, the way Goofy's head smashes and breaks is so similar to Slappy's, though I thought they were made of wood. Why are their heads smashing like they're made of cheap plaster? Where the two stories really split is at the very end. Goosebumps gets a relatively happy ending despite Dennis.
Aw, Dennis.
But the Twilight Zone goes ultra disturbing with the implication Jerry turned into a dummy, taking that "you are now my slave forever" thing to the highest degree. I think R.L. Stine took this initial inspiration of Dummies Past and just applied it to his own style for his younger audience, and I do respect that. I've always enjoyed R.L. Stine, even if his inspirations are rather obvious. If I'm being honest, after an initial watch of both of these, I thought they were cheesy and just not very interesting. But as I was writing the script for this video, I found a new appreciation for them, especially for their darker moments and relatable characters. Overall, I really enjoyed watching these two episodes back to back and going over a few notable dummies in entertainment, though now I'm left thinking we need to find a fresh new way of bringing them back into the horror genre. I wouldn't mind getting away from the demonic doll trope and maybe focusing once again on the disturbed ventriloquist like The Great Gabbo. If you have a few suggestions on more killer toy or dummy content, or if you have some thoughts on how we can make dummies frightening again, please leave a suggestion in my comments, and until next time, stay spooky. Hey everyone, thanks again for watching my video about dummies. If you're interested in more horror content, I have plenty to offer, but first I want to give a shout out to my patrons who support my love for the strange and unusual and make it possible for me to keep this channel going. If you're feeling generous, consider supporting the show with a couple bucks, and if not, please like and comment on this video to drive engagement. If you want to see more videos from me, here are a few suggestions. On the right, I have an interesting breakdown about a highly questionable episode of The X-Files. On the left, I have a spooky video on an episode of Murder, She Wrote, which also happens to be my flagship series, so make sure you check out the playlist as well. Thanks again, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.